Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery. The same slave master who owned us put his last name on us to denote that we were his property. So that when you see a Negro today who's named Johnson, if you go back in his history, you'll find that he was once his grandfather, or one of his forefathers was owned by a white man who was named Johnson.
South Africa. Segregation is being extended by a white minority government afraid of being swamped.
Do you think that the South African government's racial policy is right?
I really do, because we cannot mix with the lower nations at the moment, unless they are cultivated and educated and so on.
Do you feel yourself that the white minority can continue to maintain their position?
Most decidedly. Most decidedly.
Forever?
Forever.
The majority of the whites were descendants of Europeans who'd settled in southern Africa 300 years before. The Afrikaners had their own language, their own political party, and their own church, which taught that white superiority and rule over blacks was the will of God.
Just what does this policy of apartheid mean in practice in terms of the everyday life of the people?
You know, I think we put it this way, that apartheid is intended to keep the races apart in all sorts of ways. You know, residentially, you have already have big native locations, residential segregation. Under the Group Areas Act, the attempt is now to separate out your Cape-coloured people, your mixed bloods, your Indian group, your African group, so that they're all residentially apart. This is apartheid, the state of being apart.
To make sure the races kept apart, everyone was required to register their origins. Sex and marriage between races was made illegal, and complex rules classified people who already had mixed blood.
Massive difference in living standards between blacks and whites, and at the moment there are no plans for that gap to be bridged. In a country of 6 million blacks, only 9,000 are on the electoral rolls. Rhodesia's blacks elect 16 members of parliament. The whites elect 50. At the centre of decisions about Rhodesia's political future is Prime Minister Ian Smith. He once said that he wouldn't see black majority rule in Rhodesia in his lifetime. Is that a prediction he still stands by?
I still hope so. I believe that we would have failed in everything we had tried to do if we had to concede that that sort of thing should take place. In other words, government which depends on the colour of a man's skin, irrespective of his ability. I could never accept that in principle. I think we must continue to strive for the best government in Rhodesia.
I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
Then there were these fellows with the ducktail haircuts, and they were walking behind us, so they would make cat calls. They would say, "What are you doing in here, jungle bunnies? You know, you get out of here. You're not going to get served in here."
And we sat at the counters, and I was praying when this lady, white lady, came and she put her cigarette out on my arm. So I calmed myself down. While I was calming down, she lit the rest of her matches and pulled my poncho out and dropped the lighted matches down my back.